The sound of shattering glass pierced the quiet evening air as Kyle Lawson lunged forward, instinctively placing himself between the advancing drunk man and the terrified woman who had bumped into the man's table at Murphy's Bar and Grill. Kyle hadn't planned on being a hero tonight. His only intention had been to have a quick dinner with his 7-year-old daughter Mia, before heading home to their small apartment on the east side of town. "Back off," Kyle said firmly, his voice carrying the authority he'd developed during years of protecting the one person who mattered most to him, his daughter. At 32, Kyle's broad shoulders and calloused hands spoke of the construction work that barely kept their heads above water financially. But in this moment, they served another purpose entirely. "Mind your own business," the drunk man slurred, swaying slightly as he pointed an accusatory finger at the woman. "She spilled my drink." "It was an accident," the woman said softly from behind Kyle. "I offered to buy you another." Kyle kept his eyes on the drunk man while speaking to Mia, who sat frozen at their table. "Mia, honey, stay where you are." He could feel his daughter's frightened gaze on his back, but he couldn't turn around now. "Sir, why don't you let me buy you that drink instead, and we can all go back to our evenings?" Kyle suggested, maintaining a calm he didn't entirely feel. The bar had grown quiet, patrons watching the confrontation with the uncomfortable silence of those who hoped someone else would handle the situation. The drunk man's face contorted with rage. "Don't need your charity. Need her to learn some manners." He lunged forward suddenly, arms flailing. Kyle caught the man's wrist mid-swing, applying just enough pressure to stop him without causing harm. "That's not happening. Not today." The bartender finally intervened, calling for the drunk man to leave. After a tense standoff and some colorful language, the man eventually stumbled toward the exit, muttering threats that everyone knew he wouldn't remember in the morning. Only when the door closed behind him did Kyle turn to check on the woman he'd defended. His breath caught momentarily. She was striking, tall and elegant, with warm brown skin and intelligent eyes that held both gratitude and embarrassment. "Thank you," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Daphne Harrington." "Kyle Lawson," he replied, accepting her handshake. Her grip was firm, confident. "And that's my daughter, Mia." Mia had cautiously approached, her small hand finding its way into her father's. "Are you okay, Daddy?" she asked, her voice small but concerned in the way that always made Kyle's heart swell with pride. "I'm fine, sweetie, just making sure everyone stays safe." He looked back at Daphne. "Are you all right? He didn't hurt you, did he?" Daphne shook her head, a genuine smile warming her features. "No, thanks to you, I'm just a bit shaken. I don't usually frequent places like this, but my driver had car trouble and I needed somewhere to wait while he arranged another vehicle." Kyle nodded, noticing for the first time her designer clothes and the subtle way she carried herself like someone accustomed to command rooms rather than blend into them. "This isn't exactly the safest neighborhood for waiting alone." "I'm realizing that now," Daphne said with a small laugh. She glanced at Mia, who was studying her with unabashed curiosity. "Hello there, you have a very brave dad." Mia nodded solemnly. "He's the bravest. He even checks under my bed for monsters." Daphne's laugh was genuine, musical. "That does take exceptional courage." Kyle felt a blush rising to his cheeks. "We were just finishing dinner. Can we walk you somewhere safer to wait for your ride?" Daphne checked her phone. "Actually, it seems my replacement car has been delayed further. I was supposed to be at a charity event 20 minutes ago." She hesitated, looking between Kyle and Mia. "I hate to impose further, but would you mind if I joined you, just until my ride arrives?" Kyle glanced at their table with its modest meal of burgers and fries, suddenly aware of the disparity between them. But Mia was already tugging Daphne toward their booth, chattering about her second-grade art project. "We'd be happy to have you join us," Kyle said, following them. As they settled at the table, Kyle couldn't help but notice how out of place Daphne looked in the worn vinyl booth of Murphy's, with its chipped tables and faded menus. Yet she seemed completely at ease, giving Mia her full attention as his daughter explained the intricacies of her school's upcoming science fair. "So what do you do, Daphne?" Kyle asked during a rare pause in Mia's enthusiastic explanation. "I run a company," she replied simply. Harrington Innovations. We develop sustainable building technologies. Kyle's eyebrows rose. Wait, Harrington Innovations. You're that Harrington. Your company pioneered the solar integrated roofing materials we just installed on the Jefferson project. As a foreman for a mid-sized construction company, Kyle had been impressed by the innovative materials, even if they were usually beyond the budget of most of their clients. Daphne smiled, pleased. You're familiar with our work. It's incredible stuff. Cuts energy costs by what, 40%? 47 in optimal conditions, she corrected, leaning forward with new interest. You're in construction. Their conversation flowed easily after that, technical at times as they discussed building materials and energy efficiency, relaxed at others as Mia interjected with stories about school or questions for Daphne about her job. Kyle found himself forgetting about the incident with the drunk man, about the bills waiting at home, about the constant struggle to provide for Mia on his own since her mother had walked out 5 years ago. When Daphne's phone buzzed with a message from her driver, Kyle was surprised to feel disappointment. In just 45 minutes, he'd grown comfortable with her presence. I should go, she said, gathering her purse. Thank you both for the company and the rescue, she smiled at Mia. And good luck with your science project. Solar power is an excellent choice. Kyle stood as she did. Let me walk you out. Outside, the night air had cooled and streetlights cast long shadows on the sidewalk. Daphne's sleek black car waited at the curb, a uniformed driver standing by the rear door. Thank you again, Kyle, Daphne said, turning to face him. Not many people would have stepped in like that. Kyle shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. Anyone would have done the same. We both know that's not true. She paused, seeming to consider something. I still owe you for missing your dinner. You don't owe me anything. Nevertheless. Daphne reached into her purse and withdrew a business card, pressing it into his hand. If you ever need anything, a job reference, a consultation on sustainable building practices. She smiled. Or just want to continue our conversation about thermal conductivity in building materials. Kyle accepted the card, feeling its heavy weight and embossed lettering between his fingers. I might take you up on that. I hope you do. With a final smile, she slid into the waiting car. As Kyle watched the taillights disappear around the corner, Mia tugged on his hand. I like her, Daddy. She's pretty and smart, like a princess who builds things. Kyle laughed, pocketing the business card. She is, isn't she? But as they walked to their old pickup truck, he reminded himself not to read too much into the encounter. Women like Daphne Harrington moved in different circles worlds apart from struggling single fathers like him. The following morning brought reality crashing back in the form of a letter from Mia's school. The after-school program was raising its rates again, and Kyle's careful budget calculations showed there was simply no way to absorb the increase. He'd have to find another option, an impossibility given his work schedule and limited resources. He was still mulling over possible solutions when he arrived at the construction site, his tool belt slung over his shoulder and Daphne's business card burning a hole in his wallet. It had been just one evening, one chance encounter. Surely she'd already forgotten him, but as he watched his crew struggling with the new environmental compliance regulations that had been complicating their recent projects, an idea began to form. Daphne's company specialized in exactly the kind of sustainable building practices they needed to understand better. It wasn't charity he'd be asking for, it was professional expertise. During his lunch break, Kyle found himself in the site trailer, staring at Daphne's business card. Before he could talk himself out of it, he dialed the number. Harrington Innovations, how may I direct your call? Came a polished receptionist's voice. I'd like to speak with Daphne Harrington, please, Kyle said, suddenly feeling out of his depth. May I ask who's calling? Kyle Lawson. I met Miss Harrington last night at, he hesitated, realizing how ridiculous it would sound, at Murphy's Bar and Grill. There was a pause that seemed to stretch for eternity before the receptionist said, "One moment, please." Kyle was certain he'd be transferred to voicemail or politely dismissed, but moments later, Daphne's voice came through clearly. Kyle, this is unexpected. Her tone was warm, surprised but not displeased. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important, he said, relief washing over him at her friendly reception. "Nothing that can't wait. Is everything all right? How's Mia?" The fact that she remembered his daughter's name caught him off guard. "She's good. Working on her solar panel for the science fair. Actually, I'm calling for a professional reason. My company is struggling with the new environmental compliance regulations, and I remembered your expertise in sustainable building. I thought maybe you could point us towards some resources." "I'd be happy to help. In fact, we offer workshops on exactly this topic." There was a pause, and he could hear papers rustling. "We have one scheduled for next Friday. I could get you and your team registered." "That would be amazing," Kyle said, already calculating whether they could afford to send anyone. "Could you send me the details, including the cost? Consider it handled." And Kyle, "Yes, it's good to hear from you." After they hung up, Kyle sat in the trailer staring at the phone. He'd expected a polite brush-off or perhaps a referral to some junior staff member. Instead, Daphne had seemed genuinely pleased to hear from him, going out of her way to offer assistance. It was professional courtesy, he told himself firmly. Nothing more. The workshop details arrived by email an hour later, along with a note that Harrington Innovations would be providing complimentary registration for Kyle and 2 team members as part of their community outreach program. The generosity both relieved and troubled him. He didn't want to be anyone's charity case, but he couldn't deny that this was an opportunity his company desperately needed. 3 days later, Kyle was elbow-deep in drywall installation when his phone rang. Wiping dust from his hands, he answered without checking the caller ID. "Lawson." "Kyle, it's Daphne Harrington." He straightened immediately, earning curious glances from his coworkers. "Daphne, hi." He stepped away for privacy. "What can I do for you?" "Actually, I'm calling to see if you might do something for me." There was a hesitation in her voice he hadn't heard before. "I have a proposition that might sound a bit unusual." Kyle frowned slightly. "I'm listening." "I'm hosting a fundraiser for a new green building initiative next week. It's important that we demonstrate practical knowledge of construction issues, not just theoretical concepts. I was hoping you might attend as my guest and offer insights from your perspective." Kyle was silent for a moment, trying to process what she was asking. "You want me to come to a fundraiser and talk about construction problems?" Daphne laughed, the sound warm even through the phone. "Essentially, yes. These investors need to hear from someone with hands-on experience. Someone who can speak honestly about the challenges of implementing sustainable practices in real-world conditions. I'm not sure I'm the right person for this. I don't exactly fit in with the fundraiser crowd. That's precisely why you're perfect. You're authentic. And after seeing how you handled that situation at Murphy's, I know you can think on your feet." She paused. "There's a stipend for your time, of course." The mention of money made Kyle uncomfortable. "I don't need it's a consulting fee," she interrupted firmly, "for your professional expertise." "I'm not offering charity, Kyle. I'm offering a business arrangement that benefits us both." Put that way, it was harder to refuse, and the truth was his bank account couldn't afford his pride right now, not with Mia's after-school program costs increasing. "When is this fundraiser?" "Next Thursday evening. I can send a car for you." "What about Mia? I'd need to arrange childcare." Daphne hesitated. "She's welcome to come. There will be other children there, donors' kids. We've arranged activities for them in a separate room." Kyle considered this. The idea of stepping into Daphne's world, a world of wealth and influence, so far removed from his daily existence, was intimidating. But the consulting fee would solve his immediate financial concerns, and he couldn't deny a certain curiosity about seeing Daphne again. "All right," he said finally. "We'll be there." "Wonderful. I'll have my assistant send you the details." The relief in her voice was palpable. "And Kyle, wear whatever makes you comfortable. This isn't about appearances." Despite her reassurance, Kyle spent the next week worrying about exactly that. He had his one decent suit cleaned and pressed, purchased a new tie he couldn't really afford, and even splurged on having Mia's favorite dress professionally cleaned rather than attempting to remove the paint stains himself. When Thursday arrived, Kyle found himself standing before his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the 5th time while Mia watched from the doorway. "You look handsome, Daddy," she said with the solemn authority of a 7-year-old, Kyle smiled at her reflection. And you look beautiful, princess, like a real scientist. Mia twirled her navy blue dress with tiny silver stars spinning around her. Do you think Miss Daphne will like my dress? I think she'll love it. Kyle checked his watch. The car should be here soon. Do you have your book and your drawing supplies? Mia patted her small backpack. All ready. The car that arrived wasn't the sleek town car Kyle had expected, but a Tesla Model X with Daphne herself in the driver's seat. She stepped out as they approached, stunning in an emerald green dress that accentuated her figure while remaining professionally appropriate. I hope you don't mind, she said, greeting them with a warm smile. I thought you might be more comfortable if I came myself rather than sending a driver. Kyle was touched by her consideration. That was thoughtful, thank you, Miss Daphne. Look at my dress, Mia exclaimed, executing another twirl. It's absolutely gorgeous, Daphne said, bending slightly to admire the pattern. Those stars remind me of the night sky. Are you interested in astronomy as well as solar power? Mia nodded enthusiastically. Daddy and I look at stars sometimes from the park. He knows all the constellations. Daphne raised an eyebrow at Kyle. Hidden depths, Mr. Lawson, he shrugged, feeling a flush creep up his neck. My dad was into astronomy, passed it down to me. And now to Mia, Daphne observed. That's lovely. She straightened and gestured to the car. Shall we? I've programmed a science podcast for kids that Mia might enjoy for the drive. The journey to the fundraiser venue took them through parts of the city Kyle rarely visited, manicured business districts, giving way to exclusive residential areas, before they pulled up before a modernist building that seemed to be made entirely of glass and sustainable materials. Is this your company headquarters? Kyle asked, impressed despite himself. Daphne nodded as she parked. We practice what we preach. The building generates more energy than it uses and captures rainwater for all its needs. Cool, Mia exclaimed from the back seat. As they walked toward the entrance, Daphne briefly touched Kyle's arm. Before we go in, I want to thank you again for doing this. These investors need to hear from someone like you, someone who understands the practical realities of construction. I'm still not sure what you expect me to say. Just be honest, that's all I need, she smiled reassuringly. I'll introduce you to a few key people and then you can mingle or not as you prefer. There's no script here. Inside, the building was a testament to thoughtful design. Warm woods balanced the glass and steel, living green walls provided both beauty and improved air quality. And the lighting adjusted automatically to maximize natural daylight. Kyle found himself professionally admiring the craftsmanship, even as he felt increasingly out of place among the well-dressed guests. Daphne led them to a side room where several children were already engaged in various activities under the supervision of two young women. Mia, this is our kids' zone. They have all sorts of science experiments and art projects planned. Mia looked uncertainly between the room and her father. It's okay, sweetheart, Kyle assured her. I'll be right outside with Miss Daphne. You can come find me anytime. One of the supervisors approached with a friendly smile. We're about to start building mini solar-powered cars. Would you like to join us? Mia's eyes lit up, her hesitation forgotten. Can I, Daddy? Of course, Kyle said, relieved to see her excitement. Have fun and remember, be polite and say please and thank you, Mia finished for him. I know, Daddy. As they watched Mia integrate seamlessly with the other children, Daphne leaned closer to Kyle. She's remarkable, so confident and well-mannered. She's the best thing in my life, Kyle said simply. That's evident in everything about her. Daphne's gaze was warm when it returned to him. Now, let me introduce you to some people who need to hear what you have to say. The next hour passed in a blur as Daphne guided Kyle through conversations with investors, city officials, and fellow business owners. To his surprise, people listened intently when he spoke about the practical challenges of implementing sustainable building practices, the cost barriers, the training needs, the resistance from traditional builders. Far from feeling out of place, he found his expertise valued and his perspective sought after. During a momentary break in conversations, Daphne handed him a glass of water. You're a hit, she said, her eyes twinkling. The sustainability commissioner just told me your insights were more valuable than 3 consultant reports he's commissioned. Kyle took a grateful sip. I'm just being honest. That's exactly why it's working. These people are surrounded by yes men and theoretical projections. You're giving them reality, she hesitated. There's someone else I'd like you to meet if you're willing. The mayor's housing secretary. She's trying to develop affordable green housing, and I think your perspective would be invaluable. By the time Kyle checked on Mia again, she had constructed not only a solar car, but had somehow organized the other children into creating an entire solar-powered city, complete with working streetlights. The supervisors looked both impressed and slightly overwhelmed. Your daughter is quite the leader, one of them told Kyle. She's got executive potential, or engineering, the other added. She solved the circuit problem that had us all stumped. Pride swelled in Kyle's chest. That's my girl. When it was finally time to leave, Mia was reluctant to abandon her solar city, but brightened when Daphne promised she could visit the company's actual R&D lab sometime to see real solar innovations in development. The drive back to Kyle's apartment was filled with Mia's excited recounting of her evening, until she eventually succumbed to exhaustion and fell asleep in the backseat. As they pulled up to his building, a modest low-rise that stood in stark contrast to the affluent neighborhood they just left, Kyle turned to Daphne. Thank you for tonight. Not just for including us, but for making us both feel welcome. It meant a lot to Mia. Daphne's expression was soft in the dim light of the car's interior. It was entirely my pleasure, Kyle. You were exactly what the event needed. She reached into her purse and handed him an envelope. Your consulting fee, as agreed. Kyle accepted it with mixed feelings. The money would solve his immediate problems with Mia's after-school care, but something about the transaction left him unsettled. I'd like to do this again, Daphne said suddenly. Not the fundraiser, although you'd be welcome at those too, but spending time together. Perhaps something Mia would enjoy as well. Kyle studied her face, searching for any sign of pity or obligation. Finding none, he allowed himself to acknowledge the attraction he'd been fighting since their first meeting. I'd like that too. Good. Her smile was genuine, lighting up her eyes. I'll call you. After carefully transferring a still sleeping Mia to his arms, Kyle watched Daphne drive away, wondering if she would actually call or if tonight's connection would fade in the light of day and the reality of their different worlds. To his surprise, she called the very next afternoon. The Science Museum has a new exhibit on renewable energy this weekend, she said without preamble. I thought Mia might enjoy it, and afterward, perhaps dinner, unless you have other plans. They didn't have other plans. Kyle's weekends typically revolved around catching up on household chores, helping Mia with homework, and trying to stretch their budget through another week. The idea of an outing, especially one that would nurture Mia's budding interest in science, was tempting. That sounds great, he found himself saying. But this time, let me drive, Daphne laughed. Deal. Though I should warn you, my scientific knowledge is entirely self-taught. I may need you both to explain things to me. That Saturday found Kyle navigating his aging pickup truck through traffic with Daphne beside him and Mia chattering excitedly from the backseat. He'd been self-conscious about the vehicle, its worn seats and temperamental air conditioning a far cry from Daphne's luxury Tesla, but she'd climbed in without hesitation, complimenting the truck's character and seeming genuinely comfortable. At the Science Museum, Mia took charge, pulling them from exhibit to exhibit with the authority of a seasoned tour guide. Kyle watched with amusement as his normally reserved daughter explained solar panels and wind turbines to Daphne, who listened with genuine interest, asking questions that revealed both her intelligence and her respect for Mia's knowledge. Your daughter is extraordinary, Daphne murmured as they watched Mia interact with a hands-on display about hydroelectric power. You've done an amazing job with her. Kyle felt a familiar pang, part pride, part sadness. I wish I could take all the credit. She came this way, I think. Curious about everything, determined to understand how the world works. Still, nurturing that takes dedication, especially as a single parent. Daphne hesitated. May I ask what happened with her mother? You don't have to answer. Kyle was quiet for a moment, watching Mia. She left when Mia was 2. Said she wasn't cut out for motherhood, for the responsibility of it all. There were custody arrangements at first, but eventually she moved across the country, started a new life. He shrugged, an old pain resurfacing briefly. She sends birthday cards sometimes. Daphne's hand found his, squeezing gently. I'm sorry. Don't be. Mia and I are a team, we manage. He offered a small smile. What about you? No husband or children waiting at home? Daphne shook her head. Never found the time, I suppose. Building the company became all-consuming. Her expression grew thoughtful. Or maybe that's just the excuse I've been using. The truth is, relationships require vulnerability, and that's never been my strong suit. I find that hard to believe, Kyle said. You seem very open. About business, ideas, projects, yes. About myself. She laughed softly. Let's just say it's a work in progress. Their conversation was interrupted by Mia running back to them, eager to show them the next exhibit. As they followed her enthusiastic lead, Kyle realized he was enjoying himself in a way he hadn't in years. There was something refreshingly genuine about Daphne, a lack of pretense, despite her wealth and status, that made him feel at ease. After the museum, they found a casual restaurant nearby, where Mia continued her scientific discourse between bites of her cheeseburger. When she excused herself to visit the restroom, Daphne leaned forward. I have a confession to make, she said, her expression suddenly serious. Kyle felt a flicker of apprehension. Oh, I didn't just happen to be at Murphy's that night. I was there because I'd heard they made the best bacon cheeseburger in the city, and I wanted to try it incognito, without the usual fuss that happens when people recognize me. She smiled ruefully. I didn't expect to nearly get assaulted by a drunk man or to be rescued by you. Kyle chuckled, relief replacing his momentary concern. And, verdict on the burger, absolutely lives up to the hype, though I think I enjoyed the company even more than the food. Her eyes held his, and for a moment, Kyle allowed himself to imagine possibilities he'd long since dismissed from his life. The moment was broken by Mia's return, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of mutual interest that lingered as Kyle drove them back to where Daphne had left her car. Thank you for today, Daphne said as they parted. Both of you. It's the most fun I've had in longer than I can remember. We should do it again sometime, Kyle said, surprised by his own boldness. Daphne's smile was answer enough over the following weeks. Sometime became many times. They visited parks and museums, had picnics when the weather allowed, and even attended a local carnival where Daphne proved surprisingly skilled at ring toss games. Kyle found himself looking forward to their time together with an eagerness that both excited and frightened him. Mia, too, had grown attached to Daphne, peppering their dinner conversations with Miss Daphne says, and Miss Daphne showed me. Watching his daughter bloom under this additional adult attention brought Kyle both joy and caution. He knew how easily children could be hurt when relationships ended. Because surely this would end. Despite their growing closeness, Kyle couldn't ignore the fundamental differences in their circumstances. Daphne ran a multi-million-dollar company. He struggled to make rent some months. Her world was one of board meetings and charity galas. His was overtime shifts and discount grocery shopping. The intersection of their lives felt temporary, a pleasant detour rather than a new direction. These thoughts were weighing on Kyle's mind as he worked on a particularly challenging roofing project one rainy Tuesday. Distracted, he misstepped, his foot slipping on wet shingles. He caught himself before falling, but wrenched his shoulder painfully in the process. The site medic declared it a strain rather than a tear, but recommended Kyle take the rest of the day off. With his arm in a sling and pain medication making him slightly woozy, Kyle realized he couldn't pick Mia up from school. After unsuccessful attempts to reach his usual backup, an elderly neighbor who occasionally helped out, he found himself staring at Daphne's number on his phone. She answered on the second ring. Kyle, this is a nice surprise. Daphne, I'm sorry to bother you at work, but I've had a bit of an accident. Nothing serious, he hastened to add, just a strained shoulder, but I'm not supposed to drive and Mia needs picking up from school in an hour. I'll be there, Daphne said without hesitation. Text me the school details. And Kyle, where are you now? Do you need a ride home? I'm already home. My foreman dropped me off. Good, I'll pick up Mia and bring her to you. Do you have food at home or should we stop for groceries? Kyle was touched by her immediate willingness to help, but embarrassed by the implied charity. We're fine for food. Really, I just need help with Mia. I can manage the rest. There was a pause on the line. I know you can, Daphne said finally, her voice gentle, but everyone needs help sometimes. Even strong, capable, stubborn construction foremen. Despite himself, Kyle smiled. Stubborn, huh? Charmingly so. The warmth in her voice eased some of his discomfort. I'll see you and Mia soon. True to her word, Daphne arrived with Mia an hour later, his daughter bursting through the door with worried exclamations about his injury, while Daphne followed carrying both Mia's backpack and several grocery bags. I told you we didn't need food, Kyle protested weakly as Daphne set the bags on his small kitchen counter. These aren't just groceries, she replied, beginning to unpack them. These are the ingredients for Mia to make you her very own get-well dinner under my careful supervision. She was very specific about the menu on the drive over. Mia nodded solemnly. We're making your favorite, Daddy, spaghetti and meatballs with extra cheese. Miss Daphne says I can do most of it myself because I'm a big girl. Kyle looked between his daughter's excited face and Daphne's gentle smile and felt something inside him soften. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. While Mia changed into clothes better suited for cooking, Daphne approached Kyle where he sat on the couch, his arm still in its sling. How's the pain? She asked, her eyes assessing him professionally. Manageable. The doctor gave me some pretty good meds. Daphne nodded, then surprised him by sitting beside him and taking his good hand in hers. You scared me, when you called about the accident. It's really just a strain. I'll be back at work in a day or two. That's not the point. Her fingers tightened around his. The point is I care about you, Kyle, more than I expected to, more than might be wise given our different circumstances. Kyle looked down at their joined hands. I've been thinking the same thing, about our differences. And he met her gaze directly. And I care about you too, enough that it sometimes terrifies me. The honesty hung between them, fragile and new. Daphne leaned forward slowly, giving him time to pull away if he wanted. But Kyle met her halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that felt both inevitable and surprising gentle at first, then deepening as she carefully avoided his injured side. When they broke apart, Daphne's eyes were bright with emotion. I should check on our chef, she murmured, but made no move to rise. She's probably reorganizing my kitchen by efficiency standards, Kyle said, smiling. She does that sometimes. As if on cue, Mia called from the kitchen, Miss Daphne, I can't reach the big pot. Daphne laughed softly, pressing one more quick kiss to Kyle's lips before standing. Duty calls. That evening marked a turning point. What had been a friendship with hints of attraction transformed into something more defined, though neither rushed to label it. Daphne began spending more evenings at Kyle's apartment, helping Mia with homework or joining them for simple family dinners. Kyle, once his shoulder healed, occasionally accompanied Daphne to business functions where his practical knowledge continued to impress her colleagues. Yet challenges remained. Kyle still struggled with the disparity in their financial situations, refusing Daphne's offers to help with expenses and insisting on paying his own way when they went out together. Daphne, for her part, was learning to navigate the complexities of dating a single father, adjusting her schedule to accommodate Mia's needs, and finding her place in their established family dynamic. The first significant test of their relationship came 3 months in, when Kyle received a call from Mia's school while in a meeting with Daphne and potential investors. Mr. Lawson, this is Nurse Brennan from Roosevelt Elementary. Mia has a fever of 101, and we need you to come pick her up. Kyle immediately excused himself from the meeting, explaining the situation to Daphne in hurried whispers. Go, she said without hesitation. I'll handle things here. Keep me updated. By the time Kyle arrived at school, Mia's fever had climbed to 102, and she was listless and pale in the nurse's office. The pediatrician diagnosed strep throat, prescribing antibiotics and rest. Kyle called his foreman to explain he'd need at least 2 days off, mentally calculating how the lost wages would affect their already tight budget. That evening, as Mia finally fell into a restless sleep, Kyle's phone rang. "How is she?" Daphne asked, concern evident in her voice. "Finally sleeping. The medication seems to be helping. Her fever's down to 100. Kyle sighed, exhaustion catching up with him. "I'm sorry about the meeting. I know those investors were important. Don't be ridiculous. Mia is far more important." There was a pause. "Would it help if I came over?" "I could bring some soup, maybe spell you for a few hours so you can rest." Kyle's instinct was to refuse to handle things on his own as he always had, but the genuine care in Daphne's voice made him reconsider. "That would be really nice," he admitted, "if you're sure it's not too much trouble." Daphne arrived an hour later with not only homemade chicken soup, but also children's books, a soft new blanket for Mia, and several different types of throat lozenges. She moved around Kyle's small kitchen with familiar ease, warming the soup and preparing a tray for when Mia woke. "You didn't have to bring all this," Kyle said, watching her from the doorway. Daphne turned to him, her expression serious. "Kyle, I care about both of you. Taking care of the people you care about isn't an obligation, it's a privilege." She approached him, resting her hands on his chest. "I know you're used to handling everything alone, but you don't have to anymore, not if you don't want to." The simple truth of her words struck him deeply. For 5 years, since Mia's mother left, he'd carried every burden alone: financial, emotional, practical. The idea of sharing those burdens, of having a partner again, was both appealing and frightening. "I'm not very good at accepting help," he admitted. "I've noticed." Daphne's smile was tender as she reached up to touch his face. "But I'm patient and persistent." When Mia woke, feverish and miserable, she brightened visibly at finding Daphne there. As the night wore on, they established a rhythm, Daphne reading stories, while Kyle administered medication. Kyle holding Mia through a coughing fit while Daphne prepared more tea with honey. By morning, they felt like a team. Mia's illness stretched from 2 days into a full week when the strep developed into a secondary ear infection. Daphne rearranged her schedule to help as much as possible, working remotely from Kyle's apartment in between caring for Mia. Kyle watched with growing amazement as this woman, who commanded a corporate empire, sat patiently helping his daughter build a blanket fort or measured medicine with the same precision she probably applied to business acquisitions. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Daphne asked one evening, catching his thoughtful gaze as she folded laundry, something he'd never imagined Daphne Harrington doing. "I'm just wondering what we did to deserve you," Kyle said honestly. Daphne set aside the shirt she was folding. "Can I tell you something?" Kyle nodded, sensing her serious tone. "My parents were wealthy, but they were also distant. I had nannies, not family dinners, boarding schools, not bedtime stories." She looked toward Mia's room, where his daughter was finally sleeping peacefully. "What you and Mia have, this bond, this home you've created together, it's more valuable than anything money could buy. I'm not here out of charity or obligation, Kyle. I'm here because being with you both makes me happier than I've ever been." Kyle crossed the small living room in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms. "I love you," he said, the words emerging before he could question them. "I love you, and I'm tired of pretending I don't because I'm afraid of our differences." Daphne's eyes widened, then softened as she wrapped her arms around his neck. "I love you too, differences and all." Their kiss was different this time, not tentative but certain, filled with promise and possibility. When they separated, both were smiling. "Stay tonight," Kyle said softly. "Not to take care of Mia, just to be with me." Daphne's answer was another kiss. As summer arrived, their relationship continued to deepen. Daphne became a fixture in their lives and they in hers. She attended Mia's science fair, where her solar panel won first prize, and school play. Kyle accompanied her to industry conferences and charity events. They learned to navigate their different worlds together, finding common ground and respecting their differences. One warm Saturday in July, Daphne invited them to her home for the first time, a modern, eco-friendly house on the outskirts of the city, with panoramic views and cutting-edge sustainable features. Kyle had been hesitant, aware that seeing how Daphne lived might emphasize the gap between their circumstances. But Mia's excitement couldn't be contained, and he found himself driving up the winding driveway with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The house was impressive, all clean lines and smart technology, but what struck Kyle most was how little it felt like the showpiece he'd expected. There were books everywhere, comfortable furniture designed for living rather than display, and family photos mixed with modern art on the walls. It felt like Daphne, not like a statement of wealth. "What do you think?" she asked nervously as she showed them around. "It's beautiful," Kyle said honestly, "and very you." Mia was already exploring the expansive backyard, which featured not only a pool but also a vegetable garden and what appeared to be a small workshop. "What's that building?" Kyle asked, pointing. Daphne smiled, a hint of mischief in her expression. "That's why I invited you today, actually. Come see." She led him to the workshop, which turned out to be a fully equipped makerspace with woodworking tools, 3D printers, and various building materials. At the center was a large workbench where several projects appeared to be in progress. "I built this a few years ago for product development," Daphne explained. "But lately I've been using it for personal projects." She gestured to what looked like the beginnings of a dollhouse. "I'm trying to make Mia a solar-powered dollhouse for her birthday next month, but I'm stuck on the wiring. I thought maybe you could help." Kyle stared at her, then at the half-finished dollhouse with its tiny solar panels. "You built this?" Daphne nodded, suddenly looking uncertain. "I'm not as skilled as you, obviously, but I enjoy working with my hands. It's a nice break from spreadsheets and board meetings." In that moment, Kyle realized something fundamental had changed in how he viewed their relationship. The differences between them, while real, no longer seemed insurmountable. They weren't defined by their bank accounts or job titles, but by their values, their character, their love for each other. "Show me what you've got so far," he said, stepping toward the workbench. "Let's figure it out together." They spent the afternoon working side by side, with Mia joining them to add her own ideas. By evening, they had a working prototype of the solar system that would power the dollhouse lights and elevator. As they cleaned up, Mia ran back to the main house to wash up for dinner, leaving them alone in the workshop. "Thank you for today," Daphne said, wiping sawdust from her hands. "Not just for the help with the wiring, but for being here, for letting me share this part of myself with you." Kyle took her hands in his. "Thank you for showing me, for helping me see that what matters isn't our differences, but what we build together." "And what are we building, Kyle?" Her question was gentle but direct. "A life, I hope. A future." He took a deep breath. "I know we've only been together 6 months. I know there are still challenges ahead, but I don't want to waste any more time being afraid of what might go wrong, not when everything feels so right with you." Daphne's eyes shimmered with emotion. "What are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying I want us to be a family, you, me, and Mia. Maybe not marriage, not yet, but living together, building a life together." He squeezed her hands. "If that's something you want too." "It's everything I want," Daphne whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But Kyle, we need to talk about practicalities. Where would we live? Your apartment is too small for 3 and this place is perfect," Kyle finished for her. "Mia would have space to grow, a yard to play in, that workshop for us to teach her everything we know." He saw her surprise and smiled. "I'm not saying it would be easy. I'd need to contribute, pay my share somehow, but if you're willing to figure it out with me, I think we could make it work." "We can definitely figure it out," Daphne said, her smile radiant. "Together." They sealed their agreement with a kiss, interrupted moments later by Mia calling from the house that she was hungry. Laughing, they walked hand in hand back to the main house, where Mia waited impatiently. "Finally," she exclaimed. "Can we eat now, and then can we swim? And can I have a sleepover in my new room?" Kyle and Daphne exchanged surprised glances. "What new room, sweetheart?" Kyle asked carefully. Mia rolled her eyes in the way only 7-year-olds can perfect. "My room here, silly. Miss Daphne showed me earlier. It has stars on the ceiling and a bookshelf shaped like a rocket. She said it could be mine whenever we visit, but I think we should just live here all the time. Can we, Daddy, please?" Kyle looked at Daphne, who appeared both embarrassed and hopeful. "You made her a room." "I might have gotten a little ahead of myself," Daphne admitted. "It was going to be a surprise for when I asked you both to move in. I've been thinking about it for a while." Kyle felt a rush of love for this woman who had planned so carefully for his daughter's happiness. Mia, why don't you go check if that room has space for your stuffed animals? Your dad and Daphne need to talk. Once Mia had scampered off, Kyle pulled Daphne into his arms. You never cease to amaze me. Is that a yes to moving in? It's a yes to everything. To moving in, to building a life together, to loving you for as long as you'll let me. The transition wasn't without its challenges. Kyle insisted on contributing financially, taking on the household maintenance, and eventually converting the garage apartment into a rental property that provided additional income. They established a college fund for Mia that they both contributed to, and Kyle continued his work as a construction foreman, though with more flexibility now that commuting wasn't an issue. Daphne's company continued to thrive, and she found that having a family to come home to actually improved her work-life balance rather than complicating it. She began involving Kyle more directly in the business, valuing his practical insights, and eventually creating a position for him heading up their field testing division, a role he excelled at not because of his relationship with Daphne, but because of his genuine talent for identifying real-world applications and challenges. As for Mia, she blossomed in their blended family, her interest in science and sustainability nurtured by both adults in her life. The solar dollhouse became the first of many family projects, each one strengthening their bonds and creating memories. 1 year to the day after they moved in together, Kyle took Daphne back to Murphy's Bar and Grill, the place where their unlikely story had begun. The bar had been closed for a private event, though Daphne didn't know that Kyle was the one who had arranged it. "Why are we here?" she asked, puzzled as they entered the empty establishment. "And where is everyone?" "I wanted to bring you back to where it all started," Kyle said, leading her to the exact table where he and Mia had been sitting when a drunk man had threatened Daphne and changed the course of their lives. The table was set for dinner, with candles and flowers replacing the usual condiment caddy. Kyle pulled out Daphne's chair, then took his own seat across from her. "A year ago, you asked me what we were building together," he said, reaching across the table for her hands. "I said a life, a future. And we've done that, created something beautiful together, something I never thought I'd have again after Mia's mother left." Daphne squeezed his hands, her eyes bright with emotion. "It's been the best year of my life." "Mine too," Kyle took a deep breath, "which is why I want to ask you something." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box, placing it on the table between them. "Daphne Harrington, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, Mia's mother, my partner in everything for the rest of our lives?" Tears spilled down Daphne's cheeks as she opened the box to reveal a ring not ostentatious, but thoughtfully designed with a center stone surrounded by smaller diamonds in the pattern of a constellation. "Cassiopeia," she whispered, recognizing the star pattern. "Our constellation," Kyle nodded. They had taken to stargazing together, and Cassiopeia had become their special formation, the one they always found first in the night sky. "Is that a yes?" he asked softly. "Yes," Daphne said, her smile radiant through her tears. 1,000 times yes." From behind the bar, Mia emerged with a small bouquet of flowers, having been waiting with the restaurant owner for her cue. "She said yes," she announced triumphantly. "That means I get to be the flower girl." Kyle and Daphne laughed, making room for Mia to join their embrace. As they held each other in the place where their journey began, Kyle marveled at how completely his life had transformed in just over a year. From a struggling single father to a man with a fulfilling career, a beautiful home, and most importantly, a family built on love, respect, and the courage to bridge their differences. Later that night, after Mia had gone to bed exhausted from the excitement, Kyle and Daphne stood on their back porch, gazing up at the stars. "Do you ever think about how unlikely this all is?" Daphne asked, her head resting on his shoulder. "If that drunk man hadn't been at Murphy's that night, if you hadn't stepped in to help me, I think we would have found each other somehow," Kyle said, his arm tightening around her waist. "Some things are just meant to be." Daphne turned in his arms, looking up at him with love. "Like us." "Exactly like us." He kissed her softly, then smiled. "Besides, you did say you were there specifically for the cheeseburgers, so really, we have bacon to thank for our happiness." Daphne's laughter echoed in the night air, a sound that never failed to warm Kyle's heart. As they stood together under the vast sky, he felt a profound gratitude for the unexpected turn his life had taken from a chance encounter, and an act of kindness to a love that had transformed them both. In protecting Daphne that night at Murphy's, Kyle had never imagined he was also opening the door to his own happiness. Their story wasn't about wealth or status, it was about two people who saw past surface differences to recognize what truly mattered: character, values, and the capacity for love. In each other, they had found not just partners, but home,